All right, so our monitors now take us back to the State Department, where Matthew Miller is taking questions on U.S. support for Israel. Let's listen in.
So,
Really? There's so
Matt?
much going on.
and I expect
And
your
you have
questions will fully cover
and you
everything.
have
Give me
done-
the chance to expound on all of those things.
All right. Well, let's start with this warning to the Israelis about improving humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza. What can you tell us about this?
A few things. So first, the Secretary did write, along with Secretary of Defense Austin, to the Defense Minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, and the Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, on Sunday to make clear our concerns about the levels of humanitarian assistance that have been making it into Gaza. This was a letter we consider to be a private diplomatic communication that we did not intend to make public from our side, but now that it is public, I am happy to confirm it and speak to it to some extent. I think you have to put this letter in the context of our ongoing and long-lasting communications and concerns about the levels of humanitarian assistance that have made it to Palestinian civilians. If you go back to April, the Secretary wrote at the time to Minister Gallant to make clear that we had seen the levels of humanitarian assistance plateau, and then after they plateaued, start to decline, and made clear that at the time that the levels were unacceptable and that we needed to see Israel implement changes. They did make changes. The changes that they made caused humanitarian assistance to increase. We got up to somewhere between 300 to 400 trucks going in on some days to Gaza. But the thing that the Secretary also made clear at the time is that the increase couldn't be a one-off, that it needed to be sustained. And what we have seen over the past few months is that the level of humanitarian assistance has not been sustained. In fact, it has fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. So the Secretary, along with Secretary Austin, thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again to see that the level of assistance making it into Gaza comes back up from the very, very low levels that it is at today.
And the consequence, if they don't do that, is what?
So I'm not going to speak to that today. Obviously, we made clear when we released our report that was mandated under National Security Memorandum 20 that there are provisions under U.S. law that require us to make certain certifications, and to make those certifications, we have to see that Israel is not arbitrarily denying humanitarian assistance making it into Gaza. When the Secretary made his conclusions under that report in April, he did so based on the changes that we had seen them put into place and the increased levels of humanitarian assistance. But of course, those levels of humanitarian assistance have to be sustained.
Yeah, but what's the consequence?
There are implications under U.S. law, under policy, that I'm not going to speak to here, largely because we hope that Israel makes the changes that the Secretary outlined in the letter. We have seen Israel make changes before, and when they make changes, humanitarian assistance can increase. And we have seen Israel just in the past few months work with humanitarian organizations to implement a polio vaccination campaign inside Gaza. So we know that it's possible to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. We know it can be done. We know that the various logistical and bureaucratic obstacles can be surmounted. And so it is incumbent upon the government of Israel to surmount those challenges and get assistance in.
I mean, you say that there are implications to it. And obviously, under U.S. law, that's assistance. Is there specific assistance that come under scrutiny?
So I don't want to deal with any hypotheticals. You are right that it's just a plain reading of U.S. law. If you look at the provisions of U.S. law, that we are required to conduct assessments and find that recipients of U.S. military assistance do not arbitrarily deny or impede the provisioning of U.S. humanitarian assistance. That's just the law, and we, of course, will follow the law. But our hope is that Israel will make the changes that we have outlined and that we have recommended, and that the result of those changes will be a dramatic increase in humanitarian assistance. Ultimately, we are focused on the bottom line here. It's just it. Humanitarian assistance had been low. The changes that we had recommended had gotten it up, and those levels have not been sustained. And so we need to see further changes by the government of Israel.
I mean, obviously the timing of this, I know you don't explicitly do politics, but there's an election coming up here. To what extent is that a factor? I mean, 30 days from now would be after the U.S. election. It's been a year since the conflict has been ongoing. The president has repeatedly warned Israel about assistance, about civilian casualties, with at best mixed results sometimes. This happened in just 30 days before the election. I mean, to what extent was the election a factor?
This is not a factor at all. The bottom line is we felt it was appropriate if we are making clear to the government of Israel that there are these changes that need to be implemented, that we give them an appropriate period of time to implement them. We didn't think it was appropriate to send a letter and just say this has to happen overnight. We give them make clear there's a short window in which we want to see changes because the humanitarian situation is so dire on the ground, but it is appropriate to give them some time to work through the different issues and find ways to get the level of trucks, get the level of food, water, medicine back up to acceptable levels. Yeah, Amara.
Hi, Matt. So the 620I Foreign Assistance Act actually doesn't have the word arbitrarily. You say it's the law, but the NSM 20, which is a memorandum, has the word arbitrarily. So the Foreign Assistance Act says, when it's made known to the President that the government of such country prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport of delivery of United States humanitarian assistance, it does not have arbitrarily. So given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. And international humanitarian law does make exceptions for certain, I'll give you an example. Dual-use items is a good example. If there are dual-use items that legitimately could be used as a military purpose, of course, governments aren't required to let those dual-use items in, which is not to say that they can use that exception as a blanket restriction on anything that can be used as a dual-use item. For example, if there are military movements happening in a certain period of time, governments can restrict the provision of humanitarian aid during that period because obviously you wouldn't want to put humanitarian workers at jeopardy. So it is not accurate to say that there can be no restrictions. It's that those restrictions ultimately can't block civilians from getting the humanitarian access that they need. And that is what we're focused on doing. And so we think it's appropriate. Ultimately, what we want to see here is results. This isn't about making a rhetorical statement. It's not about making any kind of threats. It's about seeing the situation reversed. And so that the civilians in Gaza who are not getting adequate access to food and medicine and other humanitarian goods today actually see, as a result of our efforts, a change in their daily lives. And that's what we're focused on achieving, and that's what we are trying to achieve through this letter.
Sure, but I guess what I'm trying to get at, and I'll ask you again, is like, we've been at this for over a year now. You have made these warnings dozens of times, if not more, from this podium. Secretary has done it, President of the United States has done it, and yet we're here. Other outlets have reported, that Reuters has reported all the way back in April, that officials from this department have assessed in internal memos that Israel, quote, is persistently and arbitrarily impeding aid in Gaza. So if the law is already being, if it's already doing it, why is the United States waiting?
So first of all, that is not, so we've been over this before, I know, from this podium. There are people that reach that conclusion, and there are people inside this building who reach the opposite conclusion. So I think it's important to state that for the record, that when you have a difficult situations, it's not uncommon for people to reach different assessments. Ultimately, if you look at the last year and our record of working to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza, what you've seen is the U.S. intervening at critical moments. Going back to October 12th, let's not forget that it wasn't October, it was October 16th. So just a few days after October 7th, that the Secretary was negotiating with the government of Israel until 2 in the morning in Tel Aviv to get the first trucks into Gaza. I know you were there. And over the coming months have intervened on multiple occasions when we thought the levels of assistance getting in weren't sufficient, when there were policies that needed to be changed, when there are new gates that needed to be opened, we have intervened to get that to happen. And you have seen those results. You've seen us go from 1 crossing being open to 4 crossings being open. And that is the result of U.S. intervention. Now, to answer your question, we have always said that this is an ongoing process, and our assessments are ongoing. They're not static, they're dynamic. And so when the situation changes, our assessments will change and we'll act accordingly. And that's what we're doing.
And how did the Israelis respond to this letter?
They can speak for themselves. I'm not
But
going to
I
speak
mean,
for them.
have you received any assurances that they will actually take these concrete measures?
So I'm just not going to speak for them. Those are private diplomatic conversations. They can speak to their reaction.
And one final thing. What is your message to the world when they question U.S. credibility in terms of following through? Because President Biden made a similar threat to cut off or restrict U.S. military aid in April if Israel carried out a major operation in Rafah. Regardless of what you call that operation, Rafah is now like a wasteland. And we have seen one shipment of 2,000-pound bombs being withheld, but everything else, billions of dollars worth of weapons, have continued. So what do you say to people who question the credibility of U.S. in terms of following through?
So first of all, I will say, without getting into all of the details, that not all of the premises of that question are accurate when it comes to the communications between us and the government of Israel. What I will say is look at our track record of intervening to get humanitarian assistance in, and look at the fact that when we have seen when we have seen Israel not follow through on the steps that they committed to, and when we have seen the results not measure up to the standards that we expect, we have intervened with them to turn those around. And that's what we did in April. And it wasn't just a letter from the secretary, it was also the president making this clear directly to the Prime Minister Netanyahu that we needed to see changes, and that our policy would be dependent on the changes that they made. And they made those changes. Now, what we also said is that the changes need to be sustained, and the level of humanitarian assistance needed to be sustained. And over time, we've seen the level come down, which is why we are going back in and making clear now that it needs to be reversed.
Sorry, one really final thing.
You already said one more. I have to go ahead.
At the end of that letter, you also talk about establishing a new channel to raise civilian harm incidents, which sounds in a way incredible because it's been over a year. So can you elaborate a little bit on that effort? What kind of a channel you want to establish? And are you saying that Israelis basically ignored the U.S. in all of the previous communications when U.S. raised its concern about civilian harm?
I'm not going to speak to it beyond the language that's in the letter, other than to say that we continue to see Israel not taking sufficient steps to address civilian harm. And you have to look no further to understand that than the really horrific results over the weekend.
Thank you, Matt. Does this building see any inconsistency between sending a sternly worded letter with a 30-day lead time about humanitarian conditions in Gaza to the Israelis while near simultaneously deploying an advanced anti-missile system with 100 U.S. troops to man it?
No, of course not. We have always made clear that we are committed to the defense of Israel, and that's why you saw the president make the decision that he made, which I will let my colleagues at the Pentagon speak to in detail. But we've also made clear that there are provisions of U.S. law that we follow, and we will always follow those provisions. And part of that is expecting that the Israeli government fully comply with the requirements under international humanitarian law to make sure that humanitarian assistance gets into Gaza.
Sure. I mean, and this is retreading territory that Humaira and Matt just raised with you, but I mean, 6 months ago, there were suspicions that humanitarian law was not being followed by Israeli forces. So why 6 months on, if the situation is similarly deplorable, do you suspect that situation is meaningfully changed?
So you're right; it is a bit of a retread, and I hope you accept my apology for giving the same answer to the same question.
Fine.
But I think it is important to be clear that it is because we saw the situation change. I think the premise of the question, the premise of Humaira's question, is that the situation has been static all along. It hasn't been static. When we intervened back in April to make clear that the level of humanitarian assistance getting in wasn't sufficient, we saw it increase. And we saw that increase sustained for a period of time, but then not long enough, and it came back down. And so we're going to respond to events as they happen. And when humanitarian assistance increases and is an acceptable level, you won't see us raising those concerns. But when we see the situation on the ground that we've seen over the past few months, when we see the level of humanitarian assistance in September, the lowest it has been in any month since the war began, it's appropriate for us to intervene in this way.
And to briefly address the flip side, I mean, the Israeli argument is that allowing this aid in provides fuel for Hamas. They run a protection racket, they get money, they get funds, they, essentially they think that taking this step is effectively choking off Hamas. Does the U.S. dispute that that is a reason why the Israelis are limiting this aid?
So there are, without a doubt, security concerns inside Gaza that make it difficult to deliver aid, that has led to the looting of humanitarian assistance in some cases. But the answer to that is not to stop the flow of food and water that civilians depend on, and that little babies and children need to survive. That cannot be the answer to that problem. The ultimate answer to that problem is to establish a governing authority in Gaza that can provide safety and security for the Palestinian people of Gaza, that can provide safety and security for the delivery of humanitarian assistance, that can provide a long-term political path forward, as we have been making clear for some time. The answer absolutely cannot in any way be penalizing the innocent civilians who depend on this food, water, medicine to live.
Okay, I don't want to monopolize time. I have two more.
All right, you've been listening to the State Department spokesman Matt Miller addressing the U.S. pressure on Israel to boost humanitarian intervention in Gaza. That came in the form of a letter that the U.S. considered a private diplomatic communication. The letter not kept public, though. We do not know why. We do not know who let it out into the public domain, but officials in the U.S. are now having to answer questions about the contents of that communication, saying that Israel just isn't doing enough to provide humanitarian aid. You see Miller there. He highlighted over and over and over. At points, Israel increased assistance, but they want to make it very clear, especially in this letter, that they don't want to be accused of being a part of assistance just being a one-off. They want sustained humanitarian aid, so they're pushing for that.